Hello, shalom, salam, and hola. Welcome to the Hot Jewish Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, aka Hot Jewish Energy, on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. You can also find me at Hot Jewish Podcast on Instagram and Twitter, maybe, and TikTok, maybe. We'll see how it goes. Hi guys, welcome back. It's a beautiful Monday here in New York. Weather's beautiful. It's sunny outside right now. It's around 6 o'clock now. We're about to bring in our guest for today, which is going to be a lot of fun. And I just wanted to start off with something of like a story time. So, if you guys remember, I mentioned that I was going out on a date on the Two Kosher Girls episode, which is actually the episode that I filmed before this yesterday. And the date went really well. And I think there's going to be a second date. Not that I think, I know there's going to be a second date. So it was really fun. We went to a diner, we had some food, and yeah, I'm glowing today. Glowing. I gotta enunciate. Glowing today. But aside from that, I'm gonna keep it short because I want to bring our amazing guest on today. We have the Modern Maccabee icon, Instagram, 10K. Like, does such good work. I'm really proud to have him on today. He is actually coming on from the UK. I believe it's almost around 11 p.m. there, so he is really doing this at 11 p.m. and I'm really excited to have him on, and I hope you guys are excited for him to be on and to talk about what he does, what he's going to do in the future, and how he got to where he is now. So I hope you are excited as I am, and we're gonna bring him on now. I'm ready to bring him on. So coming up, we're gonna have Modern Maccabee here on the Hot Jewish Podcast. Hello, welcome back, everybody. I am here with the Modern Maccabee, aka Dan. Welcome to the podcast. What time is it there for you? I mean, I already know, but I want you to say it for the people watching.
It's 10 past 11, and that's how committed I am to the Jewish people. Look at that. On top of my day job, I'm fighting for you guys. So there we go.
Oh my gosh. That would not be me. I need like 8 to 9 hours of sleep. So kudos to you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making time to be here. I know you have your own life outside of your activism, as do I. So it really means a lot that you're here and that you have your presence online, and you're really doing a phenomenal job. I just want to make sure I say that before we start, that you are doing really great work, and we really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, and I'm a big fan of Hot Jewish Energy as well. It's the
Thank
oomph that we need in our community. So great job too.
It's the chaotic energy that people didn't think they needed, but they're getting.
I'm a big fan.
As everybody knows, I have my questions in front of me. This is going to be the running theme. You guys are going to see me looking in all directions, but we're going to start off with, so as everyone can hear, you are from the UK. So how was it growing up in the UK as a Jew? You had mentioned that your mom is Israeli and your dad is Italian Jewish. So how was it growing up in that household, growing up in the UK?
So yeah, I think a lot of Jewish people can relate to having like a complicated background. So like my dad's from here, my mom's from here, my grandparents are from there. So I was born in the UK, as you said, to an Israeli mom, Italian dad. They were both very fiery and Mediterranean, very loving, wonderful parents. But I feel like usually in relationships, you need like one to be a bit more mellow, and there was no mellowness at all. So they got divorced when I was 6, and then I moved to Israel with my mum, and I lived there until I was 13. And I think that really formed me because, I mean, I was at a rally, a peace rally that was, where Prime Minister Rabin was speaking. And it was actually the rally where he was shot. And that was when I was 8, and it felt very much like the father of the nation had died, and, the day that peace died. And I remember there was another time when I went to the mall with my mom, and I was being a bit of a brat that day, and I was like, making a bit of a scene about her buying me these trainers that light up that were all the rage when I was a kid, and she was like, "No, they're too expensive." Anyway, we get there, and the whole area is like sealed off, and that was the Dizengoff center bombing. And I guess if I was less of a brat, I would have been there when it happened. And so that was definitely kind of formative for me in terms of making me realize that there are bad people that want me dead, and that that don't want peace, including on our side to some extent. And then when but apart from that, I had an amazing life in Israel. I built a real connection with the country. I knew where I came from as a Jew. I didn't feel like, divorced from it at all. Even though my parents were divorced, I felt very connected to Israel. I felt very connected to my Jewishness, my Zionism. And I think growing up in a place like that where you led a good life, but you were aware danger was around the corner, that you had to be vigilant. That kind of taught me from an early age that there is a fight to be had, and it's not a straightforward existence. Being a Jew, you have to be aware that there are people out there who mean us harm, and that we have to fight back against to protect ourselves. And then when I was 13, everyone tells you you're a man, and so I figured I needed a bit more of a male influence. So I moved back to London to live with my dad, and then like my mum moved back with me, and so we've all been living back in the UK since '99, I think, and I've been here ever since. And I'm kind of torn. I feel like a sort of third culture kid, right? Like I feel Italian in some ways. I feel Israeli in some ways, and I feel British in some ways. Like when I go to Israel, I'm frustrated that they don't queue like British people. But then like here, I feel like people can be a little bit cold and, a little bit too like stiff upper lip. So I kind of feel torn between the two places. I don't know, maybe I'll move to Israel one day again. But for now, my place is in the UK. I have my life here, and I'm happy here. But Israel's always on my mind. And I feel like when you're in the diaspora, you definitely feel anti-Semitism and the growth of anti-Semitism more keenly than you do in Israel. I mean, in Israel, you have terrorism a lot, and you have all the attacks, and you have all the propaganda from our not so friendly neighbors. But you're amongst Jews, and being a Jew is never a problem. It's never something that costs you friends. I wish I could say the same thing here. I especially since I started doing this advocacy stuff, I've lost a lot of friends who I thought would be my friends forever, and who I thought would support me no matter what, and that wasn't the case. So that was quite a painful experience, but it kind of goes with the territory. And I feel like I always say to myself, if your friends don't believe that you're entitled to safety or a home, then they were never your friends in the first place. Like if they don't believe that a Jewish state deserves to exist and we deserve to be safe within that state, then what kind of friends are they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you said that, I think a lot of people my age can relate to that are in college universities, because there is a lot of ousting going on in not just in the American campuses, but also Canada, a lot of other countries. There's a lot of ousting going on because of a student who's supportive of Israel, or a student who's unapologetically Jewish and Zionist. There's never a time where people can truly express themselves without feeling that they have a target on their back, which is really, really sad. I got to work with an organization called Jewish on Campus that tries combating a lot of the stuff that's happening on campuses, and some of the time it's a major fail, and it's really sad when you're pushing for for people to have that same sense of acceptance in student groups or in classes, and administration just doesn't give a shit. And it's really, really sad, because you think that administration is there to vouch for you as a student no matter what you believe in, as long as it's not hurting anyone. And it just sucks. Like so many people, I've talked with people who have been shunned out of groups, that all these Jewish or Israel groups have been shut down, or they've made it more like a culture group because they don't want to talk about pressing issues or about all the anti-Zionism and white supremacy and neo-Nazism that's happening, which is really, really sad. So when you said that, it completely, I think it definitely resonates with me, and I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people who are listening or watching that are around my age. So
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see a lot of is the second someone finds out you're Jewish, they want to find out if you what kind of Jew you are. And by that I don't mean like whether you're Orthodox or Reform or Sephardi or Ashkenazi. They want to know whether you're one of the good Jews, in inverted commas, the sort of like not in my name, like I hate Israel, like I'm against Zionism kind of Jew that is kind of apologetic about their Judaism, apologetic about self-determination for the Jewish people. In which case, you're probably a bit of a useful idiot, and you can be used as a prop to kind of like bat away any accusations of anti-Semitism. So if they organize a march where they chant from the river to the sea and call to genocide Israelis, if they have you there, you can be used as a token. So in that sense, you're very useful, and they love Jews like that. They love Jews that are very critical of Israel, not just critical of Israel, support people that want to destroy Israel and cheer that along. And they do that in the hope that in exchange for saying stuff like that, they'll be accepted into the community of the good, right? The good Jews, the cool kids. And then there's those who are a little bit tougher, who know their history, who have a bit more Maccabee spirit, as I like to call it, right? And
hence
who are,
the name.
yeah, and who are willing to like stand up for who they are. And I think despite the cost, despite the fact that you might lose friends, what I discovered from this community that I've been building is that you might lose some friends, but you gain a lot of friends as well. And my first post was something along the lines of I had to come onto Instagram to find solidarity because none of my good friends reached out when my family was being bombed by terrorists, and I just posted it, and I just was like, I need to get this out there. And then it got like a ton of likes, and it got like a bunch of traction. And it was funny that I started off feeling very alone and isolated, and then I found out that like amongst Jews, I wasn't the only one feeling that. And so in doing that, I felt a lot less alone. And that was kind of like how I started thinking about maybe I should do this. Maybe I should actually dedicate myself to this and build that solidarity, not just among Jews who feel alienated like me, who are proud of who they are, who love Israel, who are Zionists, and who don't want to, check their Zionism at the door to be accepted, who want to be Jewish, and express all that means, including our connection to Israel, which, if you open the Torah, is all about Israel, right? This idea that's being promoted in the States now, that Judaism is a post-Zionist religion and that it's nothing to do with Israel, you can divorce it. It's like, dude, it's, we went out of Egypt, we get to the promised land, with 40 years in the desert, we finally get there. And then it's all about the things that happen in the promised land and our journey there. Literally, it's the story of the land of Israel. So it's weird when people are saying, oh, I'm Jewish, but it's nothing to do with Israel. I think part of it is like generational trauma, and a lot of fear, and they just think, if I don't do this, if I don't like sell out my nation, I just won't be accepted, and I could be hurt. And so I don't want to be hurt. I want to be accepted, and I want to be cool, and I want to feel integrated, and I don't want to feel like the outsider. And I think with building this community, I've met so many amazing people. I've kind of worked with this like motley crew of amazing folks who are courageous, who are aware that the odds are stacked against us, but they do it anyway. And I think that at its heart is what it means to be Jewish, right? Because us being here today is a miracle, right? Like, we've had no state. Everyone's been out to get us. We've been expelled from every way you can imagine. We shouldn't exist. Like, if you're looking at odds, right? Like, odds wise, we shouldn't exist, but we do. And so I think to be Jewish, you have to believe in miracles. You have to believe that there is some sort of plan. And I'm not saying this because I think like Hashem's going to come down and save us. I think we all have to be our own personal messiahs, and I think there is a fight to be had, for our legitimacy and for our nation. But I think that you have to be a bit of an optimist to be Jewish if you know our history and you know everything that we've endured and survived. Yeah.
It's interesting you say optimist because I don't know if it's going to be the episode before you or later, but when I had two Kosh girls on, Abby was saying that I asked her about the conflict because she has lived simultaneously between Israel and New York, and she pretty much said it flat out. She doesn't think we're going to see peace in our lifetime, and we have to be realistic. And I love that there's that contrast now. You're giving the very optimistic approach, which is where I lean more toward. I don't know if you see a lot of my posts. I really try giving an ultimatum because I hate being realistic. It makes me it makes me sad. But I think I'm trying to find that happy medium of being realistic and being optimistic. And I think by you being so optimistic, it's helping with people trying to find that midway of that. I can be realistic and say that it's going to be really, really tough and there's going to be a lot of obstacles, but that it will happen. It will eventually happen in whatever way it will happen. It will, which is that sounded so repetitive, but I think
I know what you're saying. I think there is an element of like doom scrolling when you do this as well, and like just thinking that all these things keep happening that don't look good, and that
I get tired.
You definitely need to recharge your batteries for sure. But when I say I'm optimistic, that's not to say that I'm naive or that I'm wearing like rose-tinted glasses about the challenges that we face. I think the challenges that we face are great. But I think if you look at it from a historical perspective, we are now in a better position historically than we have been for 2,000 years, right? We have a state, it's strong, it's got its divisions, as we saw the last few weeks, definitely. It's got its problems, it's not perfect. But we have a haven, and we have people who care about us, we have an army to protect us, and we have somewhere to go to if everything goes crazy again. And that's a big thing. That's something that we haven't had before.
It's something that everyone else has. That's the argument that I make a lot of the time. I mean, would I be happy if there are no religiously led states? Absolutely. Everybody should be welcome everywhere. But the reality, which is the harsh reality, how many Islamic countries are there? How many Christian countries are there? India is one of the most populated countries in the world, and it's a Hinduistic-led country. I don't even know if that's the right terminology, but you have China, which is very, if I'm saying it correctly, Buddhist.
I guess like traditionally they were Buddhist. I think maybe now under communism that's been like crushed out of them. But I think they have a nation state, even if it's not religious. They have the country that is for the Chinese people, and you can kind of look at Judaism as a religion, or you can also look at it as a tribe,
ethnicity,
and a nation, and an ethnicity. So in that sense, yes, like most of the people of the world have a home, and I always find it interesting when people are saying, I oppose the existence of Israel because having a Jewish state is a racist endeavor, and then to your point, you say, well, what about the 50 plus Muslim nations and the 21 I think Christian nations that exist out there? Like, is that racist?
That we all got kicked out of. When Israel was formed, we all got kicked out of these states. I mean, there's still, my mom's from Iran. There's still Jews in Iran, but it was kind of a situation where the revolution took place, and I don't know if it was Khomeini. I don't know which dictator had taken over at that time. I know it's Khomeini now, but she left.
Khomeini at the time, and Khamenei now.
Okay,
they tried to match the names, I think, to have that element of continuity in the terror. But it's Khomeini and now Khamenei. Yeah, the same shit, really.
Yeah, and she left. I mean, she got out. I mean, you guys are gonna listen, it's going to be before this, but you're going to have an episode with my mom, her talking about her coming to America. But she came here as a refugee. She came here on a emergency medical visa for my grandma. They were lucky to get here, and I don't know how they managed to do it but I think we also really have to be thankful for that we are so strong now that we have Jewish organizations that are helping. Like, she was able to get her citizenship, and my grandma was too, because they partnered with a Jewish organization and they got them that citizenship so quickly. And I think that just shows you how complicated it is in these Islamic countries that are very radical, because they want it to be like 90% Muslim and then the 10% of whatever to say that they have some form of diversity, when in reality, they're very intolerant. These governments are selfish. They don't want there to be diversity. While on the other hand, Israel has Arabs, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. I may be missing a few groups of people, but they have such a diverse government. Their population is so diverse, and it promotes democracy and equal rights for everyone. And people have the nerve to say that Israel is an apartheid state where people are separated and there's discrimination, when it's just how can you say that when you're looking right at the facts? Like, I know that I saw a post recently, it was from Neurotic Jewish Gay. She always goes on those like polls of like the democracy scale for all these different countries, and Israel is 77 out of 100. And then she brought up the point of that, look at all the countries that are surrounding, look at all the Muslim countries, they're under like 50 or 40%.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I recently had, actually right after the tragic murder of half the D family by a Palestinian terrorist, I had this guy, send me a DM, and he basically was like, well, they shouldn't be an apartheid state then, should they? And I was hovering on that block button for a while, and the timing was heinous, it was terrible, but I was like, let's see if I can change a mind here, whether he's really like an anti-Semite or whether he just doesn't know. And so I said to him, let's play a game. Let's play a little Middle East trivia, shall we? Can you tell me the only country in the Middle East where Arabs have been able to vote since 1948? And there was a sort of long silence. I was like, any guesses? Want a hint maybe? And then I told him that it was Israel. And then I told him, that in the last government, there was an Arab party. And that party was not just in the government, it was the kingmaker on which the coalition depended. And then I said to him, and so if it's an apartheid state and we're drawing parallels, how many black political parties were there in apartheid South Africa? Any? Were there any black members of parliament during apartheid South Africa? Were there any black judges? Any like Supreme Court judges in apartheid South Africa? And the answer, of course, is no, because the parallel is totally ridiculous. And to your point, it's not only the only democracy in the Middle East; it's the only place where Arabs have been able to vote, and and the only place in the world, I think, where Arabs and Jews serve in government together in a coalition. Yeah. The opposite of apartheid, right? And then in terms of the Arabs in Israel, it's 20% of the population. They're free to vote. They have the same rights as anybody else. There's obviously problems like in every community, and there are some people that are racist. But in terms of the quality of life in Israel, maybe apart from like the UAE, they probably have like some of the best quality of life in anywhere in the region. And then when it comes to the Palestinians, they are self-governing for the most part since Oslo. And they have chosen, in Gaza to be led by a terrorist organization, which has one policy, which is kill the Jews. And we don't want to be killed, so we stop them. And then in Judea and Samaria, or what the Palestinians call the West Bank, they have, Mahmoud Abbas, who I think is 17 years into his 4-year term. So, the fact that they don't respect democracy is kind of up to them. But in terms of the Arab citizens of Israel, there's no apartheid there. I mean, if you go to Tel Aviv and Jaffa, everyone's mixing with everyone. Like you have, a girl in a bikini next to a girl in a burkini on the beach. Like it's do whatever you want, And, in terms of the wall, I always find it interesting. Like they talk about the apartheid wall. I mean, if you look at what Hamas wants, which is to fire rockets and murder Jews, it makes sense to have a security wall. And for the most part,
Yeah.
it's a fence. It probably should be a wall, but it's a fence for the most part to stop them from being able to, enjoy that ambition and kill Jews. And the really interesting thing is that in Egypt, there's the exact same wall, right? That there is the exact same wall. And if anything, the Egyptians are much more brutal. Like they will regularly flood smuggling and terror tunnels with sewage and put toxic gas down it to stop, Hamas infiltrators from going back and forth into Egypt and into Sinai. But no one says
And
anything about that, and they don't say anything
yeah,
about that because,
I didn't even know about that.
yeah,
I you I I didn't know about that until you just said it.
there we go.
It's just it just perpetuates more of that this is a double standard. Like nobody holds Israel to the same accountability as any other country, or that they don't hold it to the same standard. And I mean, if I hope I'm not mistaking it, but in China there's they have Muslim people in China in these concentration camp like settings. No one's talking about it. No one cares. But then when one unfortunate thing happens in Israel and Israel makes a mistake, cancel Israel. Hashtag cancel Israel. Apartheid. There shouldn't be a Jewish state.
Yeah.
It's it's like it's
I find it crazy, right? That
mm-hmm,
if you do like an empirical comparison of like the number of casualties in pretty much any war that you want, and you put it side by side with the Arab-Israeli conflict, which I think is in the last count, I think since the 60s is something like between 14 and 20,000 people, which don't get me wrong, it's a lot of people and every death is a tragedy. But if you compare it to like Assad in Syria, who has killed 600,000 Muslims, right? Or the war in Yemen that's killed 400,000 people and means that 80% of the country is now dependent on aid just to live, right? Just to be able to feed themselves. There is no boycott Yemen or boycott Assad or boycott Syria movement, right? I mean, you're looking at the numbers of Muslims killed, and you're thinking, well, if you really cared about Muslim human rights, surely you would say something about it. Surely you would, boycott these countries that are killing, if you look at it combined, millions of Muslims, right? And to your point, China as well. China is a classic example of a country that is literally ethnically cleansing Muslims and bringing in Han Chinese into Xinjiang, which was historically a predominantly Muslim area, and doing basically social engineering so that they're not a majority anymore, and putting them into concentration camps. And it's a funny thing when you're powerful enough, you can do whatever you want to Muslims, and no one says anything. And in fact, your biggest partners are Muslim countries. So China recently swooped in to broker a peace deal or normalization deal, at least, between Iran and Saudi Arabia, who are like sworn enemies. And no one looked at like the fact that it's mass murdering and genociding, Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang as like a stumbling block at all. They were like, yeah, I mean, we don't care about them. You're powerful and rich, and maybe you can help us undercut America and get rid of Israel. So let's listen to what you have to say. But I mean, the hypocrisy is staggering. And then, if you look at like international bodies like the UN, when it elected Iran to the UN Commission on Women's Rights, I just was like, that is the most laughable, like clown-like act.
and then when they took them off, they took
They
them
took them
off,
off,
right?
but you know why they took
Yeah,
them off? Because of amazing Jewish advocates like Hillel Neuer, right? Who,
yeah.
by the way, was fighting for Iranian rights and women's rights for years, even before this latest kind of episode of the what I call the Iranian Freedom Revolution kicked off. I mean, it's been going since like 2009, and some would say for 43 years,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been amazing to me to see how many amazing like Jewish advocates have been at like the forefront of fighting for the rights of Muslims, the rights of Iranians.
Look at the civil rights movement in the
Yeah,
U.S. Jews stood by Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King's one of his closest friends was a
yeah,
rabbi.
Rabbi.
I mean, yeah, it's and now there's kind of going into that now. There, just to kind of mention it quickly, but there's just, unfortunately, there's so much tension now between the Jewish community and the black community, and black Jews now are kind of in such a weird
Yeah.
place because now both communities are not really melding well together. There's a lot of things that need to be hashed out, and there are a lot of things that just need to be resolved because I think a big part of the tension is is
Yeah.
misunderstanding, and or things that need to be acknowledged that okay, this happened, we need to acknowledge it, or a lot of apologies, but it's, yeah, I don't know where I was going with
No,
that,
no,
but
but I think it's an interesting one, right? Because I think everybody
yeah.
knows that the Nazis hate us, and everybody knows that
Hmm.
the Islamist extremists who like talk about killing us and wiping us out hate us. That's not new. Um, the thing that people don't really talk about is the growth in left wing anti-Semitism, which is like
Hmm.
especially far left anti-Semitism. Um, and also the what I think is the misapplication of critical race theory to Jews. So
Hmm.
basically, critical race theory says that if you're really like boiling it down, right, it's essentially a color chart, and that correlates to how oppressed you are. So the blacker you are, the more oppressed you are. The whiter you are, the more oppressor you are. And that
Yep.
that might be a lens to explore.
It's one type of
Yeah,
racism.
yeah, but it might be
Yeah.
a lens to explore anti-black racism and oppression and experience in America. The problem is when
Hmm.
you apply it to another minority group, another historically oppressed group, and the only group in living memory that was almost wiped out for not being white, which is the Jewish people. When you apply it to them and you say, well, you look white, so you must be a white oppressor, and when you misapply that, you kind of lump Jews in with the people that have been trying to wipe us out for centuries, right? With the same white oppressors that made my grandfather flee fascist Italy for being a Jew. It's weird to do it, and it's partly because people don't know who we are. People don't know
Yeah.
anything about us. They just think of us as this like white, privileged group,
Privileged. Yep.
and they don't realize that actually like the amount of hurdles that we had to overcome to succeed are like unbelievable. Like we talked about your mother. I believe it was
Hmm.
your mother leaving Iran and like building a
Yeah.
new life. But like I was just thinking when you said that about another Iranian influencer, Sheila Nazarian, and she was basically saying that she was smuggled out of Iran in the back of like a produce cart, right? Like a truck that was carrying vegetables or something, and she was smuggled out in the back of that on the eve of the revolution. And yeah, and she came to America with nothing. Now
Hmm.
she's like a Netflix star. She's like an influencer, but she built that up from nothing. And people forget
Yep.
also that there were things like quotas on the number of Jews that could attend university, especially in the most elite ones. And people always talk about
It's happening
no,
now.
yeah,
They're they're lit. I remember a family friend of mine. They His daughters were trying to get into school, and he was talking with my mom about it, and he said that yeah, I don't have a good feeling that they're going to get into these schools because they don't want, they're trying to create more
yeah,
diversity, and they don't want white Jews in the school because there are enough of them, which
it's just crazy to me.
it's
It's so
it's
yeah,
sad.
especially since like
Yeah.
we're like 0.2% of the population, and I think in America we're at the heady heights of 2% of the population. So it's not exactly like if you let smart Jews who have the grades in, you're somehow going to be like crowding out anyone else. It's not like we're on the verge of like taking over or anything like that. It's just crazy
No.
to me that we're in this position. And I was just thinking like in terms of like school and academia, everyone always like talks
Hmm.
about like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and how like what a Jewish icon she is, and she really was. But people don't realize how she became an icon, and the way she became an icon is she was the top scholar in the Ivy League, like by far, like a legend. And then she applied to become a lawyer at all the top firms in New York and all over the country. and no one would hire her because she was a woman, firstly, but also she was a Jew, right? So then she went into academia, and then like became a professor, and then became a justice. But she did it in an unconventional way because doors were closed to her. And people always say, "Oh well, Jews they control Hollywood." When you
I was gonna
Yeah,
mention
yeah. I
that.
mean, like
Yeah.
people don't realize that back in the day, the entertainment industry was viewed with disgust and was viewed as a lowly industry. And
Yeah.
like the Jews weren't allowed into the country club or the posh social circles. They weren't hired at any law firms or anything like that. So they're like, well, maybe if I go into the entertainment business, people will be less anti-Semitic. And a lot of them,
Most of the major American Hollywood studios were founded by Jews. I know Warner Brothers. Uh, oh my gosh,
I mean, you name them.
MGM.
There's
Yeah,
probably like a Jewish founder somewhere in there. And I think
yeah.
the really interesting thing is that I was looking at Jewish Facts Daily, which is an account I love, by the way.
I love them. Their Passover videos. When I saw it, it's just so. It's not only nice for Jews to share to kind of give a refresh on everything, but it's really great for non-Jews who want like an easy
Yeah,
introduction to things because it just makes it breaks it down. Yeah, they're
no,
really
totally.
great.
And I think the really interesting one that I saw was about superheroes. Right? Everybody
Mm-hmm.
loves superheroes, but what they don't realize is that a lot of the people that wrote it, like Stan Lee, for example, was Jewish, and a lot of them,
I did
yeah,
not
a
know
lot of
that.
them drew on their um, experience of being like outsiders and being outcasts and having and being seen as mutants or like different, and then they use that and they turn that into a superpower, and like and they save the world. And I thought it was a really like inspiring story of really like overcoming all the barriers that we face to make something amazing. And it just shows like what the Jewish spirit is. Like it's never say die. It's regardless of the challenges that you face. Like regardless of the fact that you're perpetually a refugee in the world and you're always on borrowed time. You're always like waiting for the next crazy party to come to power and kick you out. And despite that, we always rebuild our lives. We always like find a way to like push ourselves and excel. And we're only ever, in the slums for one generation before we lift ourselves and our families out. I mean, I'm generalizing, but I think as a whole, considering our history, relatively speaking, we've done well. But it's not been because anyone's handed us anything or because anyone thinks that we're white. Like I said, we were almost exterminated for not being white and for being a supposedly inferior race. And there were all these quotas stopping us from getting in, and so whenever anyone talks about my white privilege, because I don't have my mum's like lovely Syrian skin. My grandmother was from Aleppo, so I didn't inherit that. But I remember I went to a dinner party with a friend of mine, and I look fairly white to the average person, and we're chatting away and stuff, and then I mentioned that I'd gone on holiday to Israel, and they were like, "Oh, how come?" Like the uncle of my friend or something said, "Like, oh, how come you went to Israel? Are you Jewish?" And I said, "Yes." And then and we were talking about like nice restaurants in different countries, like something that wasn't related to my heritage at all. And then he just suddenly switched and went, well, even someone like you would admit that Hitler was a very smart man. And I was like, well, my white privilege has run out. That's due o'clock, right? Like it's like the second that they find out that you're Jewish, it vanishes. The white privilege, it vanishes. And I think at its heart, like when I think of white privilege, I think of it as safety. I think of it as acceptance. I think of it as like something that opens doors for you. And that's not something that anyone Jewish has really experienced. It might be fleetingly because of a case of mistaken identity, but it's never been the case that we were accepted because of the color of our skin. Like, when our ancestors were kicked out of Inquisition Spain for being Jews, their light skin, if they had it, didn't save them from that, right? My grandfather's light skin didn't save him when the Cossacks were committing pogroms in Russia, and they had to flee from there. And it didn't save my grandfather, whose family was a very very distinguished Italian family, among whom we had, we had people who marched with Garibaldi who unified Italy, people who served in the armed forces with distinction and were awarded the highest decorations for bravery. None of that, and their light skin didn't save them from being considered, enemy aliens that need to be destroyed. And so just going back to your initial point about, the tensions with the Black community, I think it's a lot of it is to do with a case of mistaken identity and them thinking that we are white, and not just white, we are like hyper white. Like some people have said that we are the ones that are behind white supremacy, which I find mind blowing considering white supremacy has tried to wipe us out for like 2,000 years. But I think it's partly that, and then that feeds into also the narrative on Israel, which is that the narrative that's applied to Israel, I should say, which is that it's not a case of an indigenous people coming home after 2,000 years of exile and decolonizing their land. It's a bunch of white people with no ties to the region just turning up one day and kicking out the local brown natives, which is totally absurd and ridiculous to anyone who knows their history. But that's the narrative that's being pushed. And then, I think while I definitely have always been a real staunch opponent of any kind of racism, and while Black lives do really matter, and I was appalled by what happened with George Floyd. I even went to a march when it happened. I was like shocked by it. But when I looked into BLM, the organization,
it's so refreshing that you're going to talk about this, because I'm always afraid to talk about this, and I've never really talked about it on my page with any of you who are watching, but it's scary to talk about it. So please continue. I want to chime in on this, because
I'm probably going to get a bunch of hate mail for saying this, but like I said, I think that all racism is wrong. I think Black lives absolutely do matter. I marched when George Floyd died, but I think that some of the things that the leaders of BLM have said have been very, very harmful to Black and Jewish relations. I think when Patrice Couleur said that she thought that Israel was a modern day South Africa, in other words, an apartheid state, and that if we don't find a way to end the colonialist project that is Israel, we are doomed. I think that was massively unhelpful, right? Because it tied the liberation of African Americans, which Jews have been fighting for since before the days of the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, Jews helped found the NAACP. Henry Moskowitz was one of the people that founded it in like 1904, I think. So I think they always, like, people like Patrice Cullors always like discount the contribution that Jews made to the civil rights movement. But I think it's really worth talking about, because the story of the Jewish people, the story of Exodus, is like the first time in history when an enslaved people threw off the shackles of bondage and became a sovereign nation, right? And that's so inspiring. And so when Martin Luther King talks about a promised land, right, and going up to the mountaintop, which is what Moses did,
it's very reminiscent of us.
It is literally the story of Exodus that he's drawing upon, to inspire the liberation of his own people, of African Americans. And I see so many parallels in that. And the thing that people need to realize is that the thing that white supremacists want more than anything is for Jews and Black people to be fighting and hating each other, because it's the classic colonizer trick of divide and conquer, right? I mean, that's
it's happening in Israel right now with the current political change, the change of office and everything. Everybody is like going crazy. Nobody has seen this, and obviously everybody should have the right to advocate for what they want to advocate, as long as they're not hurting anyone. It's your right to protest. We're in a democracy here in the United States, and there's a democracy in Israel. You have your right to protest, but I think we need to, in that way, everybody's looking at this, especially our enemies, and they're seeing that that we're tearing each other apart. We're arguing, we're getting into fights, and it's like upheaval. And I'm just looking at all this, and I'm like, guys, we're giving them we're giving them their breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Ah,
We can have our fights, we can have our differences, but we need to do that in the most civil way as possible. Because if we don't, we're just they're gonna take advantage of it, and they're gonna strike us when we're at our most
yeah. No,
vulnerable.
I mean, I think
And I know you're vocal about what's happening. I
yeah, no,
know, like you're
I
very
kind
vocal.
of hesitated to speak about this because I think on my page what I want is Jewish unity because we are, like I said, we're
Yeah,
0.2% of the population. We're massively outnumbered already, and so to divide ourselves is something
yeah,
that I never take lightly. And I never want to do that. I think it's worth talking about because I think there are many things about Israel's politics that need fixing. Uh, I don't
yeah,
actually think judicial reform is necessarily one of them. But
yeah,
I think more than that, I think they need a change of their electoral system because I think most Israelis don't want an Islamist party like Ra'am or Ben Gvir or Smotrich or anyone like that kind of dictating to them. And a majority of Israelis didn't vote for them. And so if you have a proportional
yeah,
representation system, not only do you empower the most extreme in each of the parties to be kingmakers and therefore give them disproportionate power, but you also are not representative of the majority of the population, and you're also creating
yeah,
instability because we've had 6 elections in 4 years now, which in a country like Israel that is constantly at war and constantly under threat
yeah.
is an unacceptable kind of level of threat.
It's
Like
a lot.
it's crazy, and you need a steady
Yeah,
hand and you need stability. So I think we need to change the electoral system. I think we need term limits probably because I think after a while
yeah.
politicians they
I mean, we have
yeah,
it here. I mean,
it's a good thing.
yeah. You should be let to have your time to shine, but then when it's over, it
Yeah,
should be over.
I I think so.
Yeah.
I think politicians are. I said this in a recent video. I said politicians are a little bit like diapers. After a while, they get full of what, and you need to change them regularly to
You
avoid that.
you can
Yeah,
curse
so
on here. It's
they
fine.
they they get, they get full of shit, and you need to change.
Yeah.
And then I think that the last thing that we need is unity, right? And I think we've
Yeah.
seen a very polarizing kind of situation where I think John McCain used to talk about like the importance of civility in politics, and I think we haven't had
Yeah.
that for a very very long time, right? And this and one
Yeah.
one book that I'm reading at the moment, which is really interesting, is called Battlegrounds. It's by a guy called
Mm.
H.R. McMaster. He used to be the former national security advisor in the U.S. And he was talking
Hmm.
about how our enemies, so like China, Russia, Iran, recognize that if they were to fight us head to head, and I say us, I mean like the West as a whole, so I mean like NATO, the US, everything, they would have no chance economically or militarily. But if they can divide us from within, then they have a chance, right? If they promote ideologies that undermine faith in democracy, if they promote politicians that undermine faith in democracy and the electoral process, if they promote politicians that encourage division and hatred of one another and mistrust of your fellow man and woman in the country, then that's their battle won, right? That's how they win. And they've been investing
Hmm.
billions in doing that, from bot farms to promoting social media networks like TikTok, where they drip feed like a lot of propaganda. They promote a lot of
Yeah. We might be losing that here.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of creators will be upset about it, but what a lot of people don't know is that in China there's a completely different version of TikTok that they show their young people. I don't know if you know this, but in China, the version of TikTok
Mm.
that they have that is geared towards young people promotes things like entrepreneurship and studying hard and like science and innovation. Be an astronaut and be a lawyer and be a doctor. And here it promotes be an influencer and have an eating disorder and maybe flirt with neo-Nazism and question democracy. And I think if you charted like two societies where one society is fed like be an astronaut and one society is fed like you know you have to your biggest ambition is to be an influencer, and your body's not right, so you need to change it, and you need to have like low self-esteem and you need to flirt with extremism, and you need to like question everything and believe in conspiracy theories. I feel like if you charted those two societies over like 20 years, you see exactly where you end up, right? And so the idea in promoting that is that they will have a society of go-getters and achievers, who believe in themselves, believe in their nation, believe in the integrity of their culture, and then us, which is hopelessly divided, insecure, lacking ambition, lacking drive, lacking innovation. And so there's a reason why they're doing that. And so I think, one,
I think it's time for
yeah,
TikTok to go.
with you.
I want Vine
Yeah.
back. I don't know about you. Do
I
you remember
remember Vine,
Vine?
but it was a bit of a blip. I feel like it didn't make a huge impact on me, but I know that diehard.
It may because I grew up with it. When Vine came out, I was like 12 or 13, and it was like cultural phenomenon here in the States. Like everybody loved it. People made like so many people that are like millionaires now made their careers off it, and I want that back. Like that was US based. It was safe. People actually were creative on it. You only had 6 seconds to do stuff. Like I miss that. Now TikTok, it's just so flooded. Like I don't go on TikTok anymore. That's how I actually started out my page. It didn't start out as Hot Jewish Energy. It started out as me voicing my opinion, kind of similar to how you started, of thinking, do I have anyone that agrees with me? Do I have anyone that feels the same way? And it was actually the same month that you started it. You said May
Yeah.
2021. That's actually when
Yeah.
I started. I remember I posted it, and next morning I have like 10 or 20 texts on my phone like asking if I'm okay, because I got emotional in the video because I was really pissed with what was going on, and it was like an overnight thing, and I was like, okay, I guess people have something to say about this. Most of it was negative, like all the Free Palestine stuff
Yeah.
and whatever, but there were some people who came in and they said, dude, I feel the same way too. It's okay. We're going to get through this. And that's how it started. So it's really interesting how both of our journeys kind of started in the
Yeah,
same way.
it's funny. Like I joined Instagram not at all to advocate for, I love being Jewish, but I didn't join to like be an advocate or
Yeah.
start that. My ulterior motive in joining was to share my love of food, but also maybe get invited to a few restaurants for free. And I kind of thought of myself,
I
it's
mean, that's good
yeah, it's
reasoning.
it's pretty solid. I think like I'm a big foodie, so I figured, if I'm spending all my money
Mm.
on restaurants, that's probably not very good like long term. And I'm kind of known as like amongst my friends as Time Out. I don't know if you guys have that in America, but basically like it's like a food guide. It's like Zagat or whatever you. Yeah,
I've
yeah.
heard of Time Out, yeah.
So I'm always the guy that people ask.
What's your favorite type of food, like
Uh,
culturally
I
wise?
have to say Israeli and Italian, but I have a very soft spot for Indian food. We have some really bang,
I was gonna,
pretty good.
yeah, you guys have good
Yeah.
Indian food there, because my dad, he actually spent some time in London, in England, UK area, and not area. That's a kind. It's the whole thing. Oh my gosh. And it's
Americans and
like only
traveling. We need to do more of it. Yes. Just
I
got that
really
passport.
do,
Let's
but
let's go.
he.
Show you the UK area. Yeah.
Oh my god. I would love to go to the UK, and we definitely have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get like coffee or
Sounds good.
something when I'm there. But or tea. Let's do tea. Um he was spent a lot of time over there. He worked there. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon, and he, oh my gosh, what hospital was he at? He was at oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to ask him later, but he said, yeah, the English food, because he came from India, so there's a lot of spices, there's a lot of soul and everything, and he said, yeah, the British, they thrive on other people's food. And he said, yeah, the Indian spots were good. There was like the only thing that they do he says the only thing that they do really well is fish and chips. Like
Do you
that's
want to know a
like
really funny story? Fish
banger.
and chips is Jewish.
What?
Fish,
Fish and chips is
fish and
Jewish
chips was
food?
brought to the UK, I believe, by Russian and Polish immigrants to the UK. Generally, yeah. So
So
even that
Brits did nothing.
they
They just stole.
stole a
I'm
bunch
kidding.
of food. Like they had a couple of moldy potatoes and maybe some tough steak or something that was probably badly cooked in its
Oh
life.
my
But yeah, that's us too. Yeah. So
god. Like, I mean, the US isn't any better.
yeah,
We stole everything too.
I mean,
Yeah, we're not
but
a.
it's another example of like unsung Jewish contribution. I can't remember
Yeah.
whether it was Sephardi Jews or Ashkenazi Jews, but it's definitely the Jews. We're definitely behind fish and chips, so I count on that. You can Google it later, everybody that's watching. But yeah,
Oh yeah.
represent.
Oh yeah. If you while you guys are watching, Google it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna Google it after, but you
maybe we'll get
Google it.
Jewish Facts Daily to do a video just on fish and chips. Super Jewy. But yeah,
Oh, that'd be fun. I want to see what we haven't talked about because, well, we're gonna get into Sacha Baron Cohen because I want to. I told you that before. So I want to keep it light, but there's so much. So with anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, do you see that there's a very big difference in the UK as opposed to the
I think
US?
that's actually a really, really important point. It's kind of like what I really wanted to talk about. The main thrust of this discussion was basically like imparting some of my experience as a British Jew and fighting successfully against an openly anti-Semitic candidate who had a pretty good chance of being a prime minister. So in the UK, we had a guy called Jeremy Corbyn, who became the leader of the Labour Party, which is the used to be the centre left option. And then you have the Conservatives, and that's kind of like the equivalent of the Republicans, although much more moderate. And British Jews were kind of like split 50-50, like half, maybe more than half, like probably like 55% or so voted Labour, and the rest voted Conservative. And then Jeremy Corbyn came to power. And Jeremy Corbyn is kind of ideologically quite similar to, I would say, the Squad in many ways. He doesn't believe that Israel has a right to exist. He constantly supports Palestinian terrorism. He actually invited Hamas and Hezbollah representatives to Parliament and called them his friends. He laid a wreath on he laid a wreath on the graves of the terrorists that committed the Munich massacre, where they murdered all the Jewish athletes at the Munich Olympics. He basically led a purge of any kind of Jewish MPs in the Labour Party, some of which had been serving for like 40 years. And so a lot of British Jews looked at that and were like, this is not the party that I signed up for. Like, I don't want to have to choose between my Jewishness and being, progressive or believing in, social justice. I feel like this is just racism. So they voted with their feet, and like they didn't necessarily all suddenly vote Conservative. Like there were some seats where there were other parties or other options where they could vote to stop Labour, but they all recognized that they needed to do something and they needed to stop Labour. And as a result, Jeremy Corbyn slumped to the worst defeat since I think the Second World War for a Labour government, for a Labour Party rather, and that was kind of achieved by a lot of really decisive action from our community. So a good friend of mine who founded Campaign Against Antisemitism basically compiled a report on all the instances of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, and they sent that into a body called the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which conducted an investigation into anti-Semitism in the party, into systemic anti-Semitism in the party. And they basically found that, yes, there was a lot of systemic anti-Semitism from the leadership. All the complaints against anti-Semitism were kind of like mothballed or pushed aside by Jeremy Corbyn or all those around him. And so you had this like unbelievable situation where the Labour Party became only the second party to be labelled institutionally racist by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which ironically Tony Blair of the Labour Party had founded 10 years before. Right. So that was a bombshell. And I think that was a huge win for British Jews. And I think we were really I worked with a lot of people to make people aware of the threat that Jeremy Corbyn posed, not just to Jews, but also just to our security as a whole. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't believe in NATO, who refused to condemn Russia when it tried to poison people with nerve gas on British soil. Like he's a real piece of work. He's the kind of guy who only ever praises dictators and terrorists in the name of human rights, but will never like stand with the British government position. Like he was a big supporter of the IRA when they were committing terrorism in Ireland and in the UK. So it's interesting that a lot of the time the groups that want to kill the Jews and destroy Israel are also the groups that tend to be very anti-Western, right? And that's something that people don't often understand. I mean, the neo-Nazis want to rip our societies apart and have everyone at their throats and have like a racial hierarchy, which would de facto destroy what we think of as Western society. The far left wants communism to win and is all for like dictators and like pro Putin, anti NATO, American imperialism is the cause of all evil. Islamist extremists want to kill us, I guess, on religious grounds, but they also want to make the West Islamist as well and be intolerant here and have the gender apartheid that we see in some of their countries here. And so there's a lot of like anti-Western as well as anti-Semitic ideology that goes in there into the ideology of Jeremy Corbyn. And I think what we did is we said, one, it's terrible to be racist. He's basically promoting terrorism. And two, he's also anti-British and also is a threat to your security as well. And not that that's the reason why you should care about British Jews. You should care about us because we're people and we deserve the same civil rights and protections as anyone else. But he also really, really hates Britain. And so you kind of wonder why someone like that should ever be given the chance to lead this country and act in its interests, right? And so
why is he even living there
yeah,
if he hates Britain so much?
yeah,
Why is he there? It's like the anti-Zionist Israelis. I'm just like, why the
yeah.
fuck are you living there? Leave. Go somewhere. Go somewhere else. Go to Gaza. Like, come on. It's oxymoronic. Like, yeah,
Absolutely. So I'm with you. So I think what I'm saying
yeah.
is that in the UK, and I don't know the reason for this, but I think in the UK, even though there were lots of Jews who were passionate voters of the Labour Party and who had been in the Labour Party, some of them for longer than I'd been alive. There were some MPs that were there like 40 years. They voted with their feet when they saw what had happened and when they felt under threat. And one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about is making sure that the entryism and the extremism and the kind of like small kind of cult within the Labour Party that managed to take over this serious party of government and kind of push its anti-Semitic agenda. I don't want that to happen in America. And I'm seeing worrying signs. I'm seeing worrying parallels. Um, you know, some of them in the Republican Party with the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar, who, Marjorie Taylor Greene talks about Jewish space lasers and crazy shit like that. But the more dangerous and the more pernicious anti-Semitism that I'm seeing is in the Democratic Party in the squad on the far left. And what's really dangerous about that is that Marjorie Taylor Greene says Jewish space lasers and everyone rolls their eyes, but Ilhan Omar, packages it in the form of like, I'm a woman of color fighting against the white supremacist Zionist regime, and suddenly it's really acceptable to say that it shouldn't exist and should be
Yeah.
destroyed. Uh,
She knows what
yeah,
words
yeah,
to use. That's what makes it so much more conniving, because they think, oh, this person is saying such great stuff. Oh, they're not, everything is so great, when really all they're saying is coming out of their ass because they just want to sound good. They're racist people. And then they're like, oh, you can't be racist if you're a person of color. People, for like we were saying before, racism isn't just skin tone based. There are different forms of racism, and that's what people, especially in the US, fail to recognize. Like, when we're in school, we're taught that racism is black or white. That it's the oppression of black people. We don't really talk about the different forms of racism and how racism has evolved and how anti-Semitism is one of those very different forms of racism that people don't understand, that people fail to understand. And yeah, the Squad is just, it's such a weird, tricky thing because there are so many Jews here in the States that are Democrats, which I don't really understand because I myself, I'm a registered independent. I don't align with either party because of that thing that you said. You kind of don't feel like you're in the right
Yeah.
place with
Yeah.
either party. I'm not very conservative. A lot of what the Conservative Party and the Republican Party does is batshit, but the Democratic Party does batshit stuff too, and they're not very pro-Israel. And honestly, our president, he's not strong enough to have his own stance, and it's
Yeah.
really sad because there's so much turmoil going on in his own party and he doesn't have a backbone to say anything about it, and it's upsetting. I feel like the only person that's actually doing something for the Jews, and I'm kind of weary of him, is Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband. He actually, I mean, do I love him? No, I don't love him. I think he used Judaism to as something to his advantage while he's in office. I don't think he was even really religious to begin with before he came into office, but now he I appreciate that he's I mean, do I love that he's the person doing it? No, but at least someone's doing it. Like, he invited all the different Jewish organizations to come speak at the White House. One of my friends, Julia Jassy of Jewish on Campus, she went with Micah, who is the other leader in Jewish on Campus, and they got to speak at the White House. Like,
Yeah.
that's something. And it's people my age. Like, she's younger than me, and it's just someone giving a voice to not only young Jewish people but to Jewish organizations in the White House. We usually never see that. We have oh my gosh, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but they just assigned someone to combat anti-Semitism in the White House. Like,
yeah,
thank you. It's just something we haven't really seen. Am I happy that it's with Doug Emhoff and that it's with Biden? Not really, because I feel like they're kind of fake, but
yeah.
it's something.
I think what I want to see though is like actions, not words. And I think Julia Jassy and Jewish on Campus and all the Jewish influencers that went are like really amazing people, and they do amazing work. I'm just not convinced that the Biden administration is doing the things that it needs to do and is strong enough in fighting anti-Semitism and the attempted takeover of the Democratic Party. And
they're not strong enough. They're not strong enough in a lot of things either. It's like a lot of the promises that that Biden has been making, he hasn't been keeping, and he's over 2 years into his term. He's going on 2.5 now, and it's just sad that a lot of the promises he made, and I wanted him to succeed. Any president that's in office, no matter what political party they believe in, I want them to succeed. I want them to do good for the country, because that's all we can hope for as Americans. And it's just sad that he hasn't been keeping his promises. But continue.
I think more than Doug Emhoff, I think the person in the Democratic Party that I am most inspired by in terms of his stance in support of the Jewish people and against anti-Semitism is Richie Torres, who I think is a phenomenal congressman. I mean, he's black, he's gay, he's also Latino. He's like the first kind of congressman to be all these things who was like elected, and he's progressive and he's pro-Israel, and that is really, really powerful because it kind of undermines this nonsense argument that's being built that like Jews are somehow like white supremacists and that anyone that supports them supports white supremacy. I'm like, Richie Torres is not white, and he's progressive, and he supports Israel, and those are the kind of like voices that we need to promote. But I think in terms of the
Don't go anywhere. Part 2 of the Modern Maccabee episode on This Is Hot Jewish Energy will be starting right now.